Nicole Espinoza started her real estate career in 2009 with lenders in foreclosures. During her work, she noticed many of the affected families had little to no information to prevent it. That's when Nicole decided to do something about it and get into short sales. Since, she's saved thousands of homeowners from foreclosure. Nicole is a hardworking mom of two. She's the best-selling author of Short Sales Uncensored and the founder of Short Sale Queen. Now she's ready to share her secrets with the world, the good, the bad, and the ugly in entrepreneurship, and her journey to success. Here's your host of Entrepreneurship #Uncensored with Nicole Espinoza.
Welcome back to another episode of Entrepreneurship #Uncensored. And today I have a very special guest, Josh DeShong. And I'm so excited to have him here today because I consider him personal mentor, friend. I've known you forever now.
Yeah.
I was actually talking about you earlier today. It was like almost 9 years?
10 years, somewhere around there.
It's crazy. So I'm very excited to have you here. Thank you so much for
coming to the
studio.
Thank you.
A little bit about Josh. He does a little bit of everything. So he, that's why he said companies for your title.
Yep.
He's probably one of the smartest human beings I've ever met in my entire life. Adore him. And actually on a lot of different podcasts, I mention your name and I'll be like, oh, so when I talk to Josh, whatever. So anyways, so thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It'll be good to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people that don't know you, can you just give a brief intro of, who you are and what you do and all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Josh DeShong. I've been in the space for 15 years in the real estate space. Started off as a real estate agent. That's where you and I connected way back when. And today I'm the CEO of DeShong Companies, which is a family of brands and products specifically in the real estate industry, from our legacy business, which is a retail brokerage business, to our wholesale brand, which is Myers the Home Buyers. So we have a scaled wholesale operation in 3 different markets here in the U.S. So yeah, that's it. A little bit of everything.
So it's a funny story. So, and I don't think we've actually ever talked about this because I don't think we've ever done anything, right?
No, I don't think we've ever done anything like this. No.
So I'm very excited about that. Just talked about you, so no big deal. But I remember when we first met and it was at KW and I sat in your office and I was like, I need help. And I remember because you were getting hit up all the time by real estate agents. And I'll never forget, you told me, okay, I'm going to give you this advice, but if you don't take it, don't come back. And I took that so serious. I was like, okay. And then I remember I came back and I'm like, I did it all. I did everything.
Yep.
Ordered the book, did exactly what you said, cut the expenses, and that is something that, obviously meant so much to me, of course, just over the years and being able to have those conversations with you. But most importantly, like the conversations that we do have and just incredible, just how you've grown your brand, like seeing you from with your team and and now your brokerage. And of course, just the way you've scaled is just absolutely incredible. So I do want to go over a couple of those things just to go off of our conversations. Like, what do you think, with everything that you've got going on right now, like, what do you think your biggest challenge was in scaling?
Okay. So, this is a great question, and it's one that can be answered very simply. And that is, I would say, underestimating the operational requirements of scaling. Like, we think about growing what we do, but the requirements for process, procedure, roles and responsibilities, that all changes. And so, I would say I underestimated the complexity from the very beginning, which was kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Because when you're not paying attention to the complexity, you're just focused on solving the problem in that moment, which a lot of times can be valuable. But simultaneously, if you're not considering all the other related dependencies based on whatever problem it is you're solving, plans don't always work the way that you design them to be, right? So that I would say underestimating the requirements of scale and not truly being methodical and thinking that through ahead of time was probably my biggest mistake. Now, I've been able to adapt, and I've been able to realize as we're going through our evolution as a business, I've been able to realize where our holes are, and I've been able to backfill those. But it's changed the way that I think about business and products, in that now I check off certain boxes. Okay, will this scale? What will this affect? Who will be impacted by this change in operation? And it's just having a very intentional thought process behind it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, instead of just, winging it and going all in.
Yeah, I'm used to just winging it and going for it,
Yeah.
and sometimes that turns around and bites me in the ass. So,
But I mean, I think that is in general just sales, right?
yeah,
Because you
absolutely.
started off as a buyer's agent, right?
Yep. And I started off as a listing agent.
Listing agent. Okay.
I didn't have the patience for buyers, so I wasn't as good.
Same.
I wasn't as good working with buyers. And yeah, when you're in sales, it's really easy. It's, you do this action over and over and over until you get a result, and you just engineer the numbers to get the outcome you want.
Right.
But when you're building a product, it changes. It's different. You have to consider other stakeholders' needs and other people's roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, I think one of the best advice I got from you was, remember when me and you sat down and I was telling you, I'm like, I am not making any money.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got to this point where like this bottleneck in my business where I was like, I see all this money coming in and like, why am I broke type of situation, remember? And I
Yep.
remember you told me, you're like, you are at this point where you have to either cut back or keep going.
Yep.
Right. And I think that is a lot of people's challenge, where they think they have this misguided, thought process that growth equals money
Mm-hmm.
and scaling equals money. And that's just such a huge misconception, because more
Completely.
sales does not equal more revenue.
Completely. And well, one, I got to commend you, because, I did tell you, you have to take my advice if you asked me for my advice, and you did. You really did. And you did things so much better than I could have ever done. But yeah, scale before you've scaled, you envision what scale looks like. And that vision changes every time.
Yeah.
And you end up getting something that's very different than what you thought.
Yep.
So you have to kind of be mindful of what you're asking the world for, I guess.
Yeah. And I think the hardest part for me was like that shift of like, you're making more money, but not to spend more money. Because I remember you told me one time that you're like, when you started making more money, that's when you cut back on expenses. And you said you had lived, can you talk about that? You're like, I lived in a $600 apartment. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So personally, for the last 15 years, I have always kept my income as low as I possibly could. So to this day, my income is, not more than most six-figure earners, what I actually take home. And that's given me the ability to invest. But yeah, I've never lived off of more than, I want to say in the very beginning of my career, I lived off about half of my income. And up until recently, I'm living on less than 10% of my income.
That's incredible. It's so
yeah,
hard, but it's
very hard.
It's a lot of discipline. Because I remember I was talking to you, first of all, it took a while to learn my numbers, because as a salesperson, I'm like, I'm just going to create more income, but I'm profitable, right? There's money in the bank. And you're like, no, like that's cute, but no. And so I think that's the hard part, where it's just like, no, like you have to actually be so heavily focused on what it looks like, so that you can, like, your cost per lead, because we've had that conversation so many times. And that was the hardest thing for me, was getting my expenses down, because, when I actually started making money, like most entrepreneurs, it's like, okay, I get a bonus. Like,
yeah.
like I worked really hard. I finally have money in my account. Like, we've got to take that trip,
Yeah.
and the shopping adds up and all of that, but it's not scalable and it's not, maintainable.
I was actually talking to somebody about scale the other day, and it's really just backing into, what do you envision? Like, what are your goals? Like, if your goal is you want to make $400,000 or $500,000 a year, then that's a different goal necessarily than scaling. You can make 400 or 500, you can make $1 million, you can make 2 million without scaling. So they're just different things. And
Yeah.
Scaling requires capital, and it requires you make mistakes.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Yes. So you have to be very disciplined on your own, how you manage your own funds, if you want to go out and manage the funds of a business that's aggressively trying to grow and solve interesting problems.
So how has your mindset shifted? Like, what have you done to shift your mindset from listing agent to CEO of multi-million-dollar companies, billion? I don't know where you're at now. But...
No, billion, not a billion. We'll get
Yeah,
there.
something like that.
That's a great question because I've actually had to change a lot. As a CEO, your primary responsibility is to your people and your shareholders. It's not to yourself, so to speak.
Right.
And so that's the biggest mental leap that I had to make. When I was an agent, it was all about, optimizing things so I could control, my life and make sure that my life was going to be stable and make sure that I wasn't going to, get fired and then lose my house or whatever the case may be. It was always about like
Or just
self-preservation.
getting sales in general.
Yeah, just getting survival, right?
Right.
And then now the game has very much become about winning through others rather than through my own action.
I love that.
And that's a tough thing. Like every level you get to in business, at least I don't think it ends. It hasn't for me. You have a new challenge, and right now that's my challenge: is how do I win through people consistently?
Yeah.
Versus just winning through my own effort, because winning through my own effort, I can kind of control that, right?
Right.
So.
Well, I think that's probably for me, my biggest challenge with scaling is people, because we talk about that, how like on any level, the hardest part is the hiring.
Yes.
It's the culture. It's finding the right fit. And like, in order to find the right fit, then you have to identify. But if you don't know and you're not intentional with what type of personality you need or what you're looking for, then you just get into this whole thing where you're like this domino effect where you just have warm bodies that aren't really adding value or helping you grow your brand.
Right.
And that's the hard part, as the transition from going from agent responsible to yourself to CEO. And you're just like, okay, not only do I have to delegate and worry about other human beings, but now my brand, my baby that I've worked so hard on, other people are responsible for that brand. Like, how have you managed that? Like that part of it? Because you guys are, I mean, you have several different companies with people that you've had to put in place for that.
So yeah, and for everyone watching, we're at about 60 people now, and we've grown quite a bit. 3 years ago, we were at about 18 people or so, and so yeah, I think as you're scaling, so big businesses aren't usually the result of one person's innovation.
Yeah.
They're usually the result of hundreds or thousands of people's innovations combined and together. We look at like Google. Larry Page and Sergey Brin are actually not the ones who are responsible for the search algorithm that made Google what it is. It was another engineer that was another co-founder that was working at the house back in San Francisco that saw a problem they were working on and said, hey, here's the solution, here's the fix, right? So I think, putting myself to the side and putting people ahead of myself and putting their thoughts and their ideas, that's really what it's becoming about. It's really tabling my ego when I think I know the answer, and hearing other people out, like really trying to listen for the right people, make sure that you're figuring out who goes in this seat, what kind of advice should they give me, what kind of a person do they need to be, are they stern, are they aloof, are they creative type, like really understanding who goes in these roles and what you need out of those people as far as ideas, and you need to invite them to help you scale. Like that's really what they should be there for, not to carry out a job. It's not, hey, your job is now to push this button every hour. Now it's, hey, your job is to push this button every hour. But while you're doing that, can you think of a better way to do this?
I love that you said that, because it is more of like a collaboration, because then they take ownership of the role and they fuel into your vision and they take it to the next level, because it's like, okay, now I'm hiring you not only, like you said, just to do a job, but like, can you help make it better? Because I only know what needs to be done. Like, I don't know how. And I say that with new hires. I'm like, you tell me what you need. Like, you tell me, like, I'm in, like, whatever you need, I'm in. Just let me know what you need to organize yourself, how to make it better. I'm open. And if you have more of a collaboration, like, you can't train someone to care. Like, you can't train someone to buy in. And there's so many people. I mean, I remember like 6-7 years ago. Like you still have some of the same people
Mm-hmm.
that have been with you forever,
Mhm.
that have not only bought into your vision, but that have collaborated and helped you take to, you know,
Yep.
to where it is. So I think that's really important for
Yep.
sure.
And if your people see themselves as part of it,
Mhm.
it's just a better dynamic. They when we have wins that don't directly impact them, they have a win out of it, right? Like
Yeah.
they're able to get joy and satisfaction out of solving things as a collective, and that's what scaling is all about. And at the end of the day, it's about getting a bunch of people together and focused on solving common problems. But it's just a lot easier said than done.
It's a lot easier said than done. I think a lot of the things too, that like what you said about, you know, what kind of person, you know, are they stern? Are they this? I feel like those are the type of things you don't know until you throw someone in there and you're like, okay, no, that personality does not work.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I know I'm not looking for, and you know, it really is trial and error.
Yeah.
Like,
You know what helps though, like so much? What I found is, I'll admit we just started doing this 2 years ago, but it's reference checks.
Yeah.
Like we go harder on the reference checks than we do on the interviews. So we're pushing people to tell us that their friends are terrible people, or that they're aloof, or that they're
like, no,
whatever.
seriously, tell me the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah, and we phrase our questions in a way that would be very difficult for somebody to lie if they don't think their friend would be good at the job, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, you know, tell me about a time you've seen somebody break the rules in order to accomplish what they were trying to set out to, and it didn't turn around and bite them in the butt, right? Like,
Yeah.
Asking the question that way makes them open up. Or another one is, okay, can you give me 2 more friends or referrals that know so and so, and what will they say when I ask them?
I love that.
And then people will open up and they'll just tell you things, and they'll say, oh, well, you know, I said this, but they're probably going to say that this and this and this. And you'll find like little differences.
The inconsistencies,
Yeah.
and hopefully consistencies.
Yeah. But hiring is not it's not a perfect science. It's something you always have to get better. And firing fast is also another thing that, like, if you hire somebody and you see that they're not a right fit, you got to cut them.
Yeah.
As quick as humanly possible to save you and them the
Which
stress.
I think is the hard part for sure, because having to identify that, and then, you know, for me, I feel like I've gotten better at it.
Mhm.
At the sense of like not hiring out of like desperation, right? Like it was
I would say you absolutely
Thank
have.
you. Okay, so see, he said it. That makes it was a tough go there for a little bit, but
Yeah.
no, I mean it's just hard because, you know, for me, like I am your opposite. Like
Mhm.
we talked about this. Like I am literally your opposite, and which is why it's so great having conversations with you, because I'm like, oh, you're so smart. I would never think of something like
I
that.
can see the same about you.
Yeah.
So
So the thing is like for me, like I didn't, you know, I went into it like, how can I just make money?
Mhm.
Like there was no like organization to it or like plan or anything. And then it was like, okay, I can make money. Now how do I keep it? And how do I scale and run
well,
it?
and honestly, I started that way too.
Yeah.
It was very much like, how do I make money? It's just I've realized there was a lot of things I did that I would do differently now that I have money, right? When I started in real estate, I had $500 and nothing, and a dream, and so right. So
And a little bit of ignorance too. That helps.
the ignorance helped like
It
a
really
lot.
does.
It really did, because I wasn't jaded. I picked up
Right.
a phone. I think you know the story. I cold called for 3 months straight before I set my appointment. I dialed at least 100 dials a day,
Yep.
and it took me 3 months to set one appointment. That ignorance played out really well for me.
Well, most people wouldn't do it past a week.
I know,
or,
because they'd be like,
3
oh, this doesn't work. I was
Right.
just like, oh, I'm just not good enough yet. And that turned out to be the
See,
truth.
That is a great perspective.
Yeah, that's all it was.
Yeah.
I just figured, because when I got in, I was 18.
Yeah.
At the time, there was not young people in the real estate world. And so I just figured the reason I wasn't as successful as they were is because I wasn't old enough yet. So I was ignorant to the fact that cold calling is hard. I was just
Right.
like, oh, it's just because they know it's more normalized for these experienced professionals. Like,
And then
what?
you go into it and you're like, oh, just kidding.
Yeah. Once I got good at cold calling, then I started trying to think about, okay, how do I build this as a business? How do I replace myself and step out of cold calling and move into the next thing and the next thing, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think definitely ignorance is a huge factor of that and
For sure.
tenacity. And for me, it was like no backup plan. I just have to, you go with it. And I had a salary and I came in and I was like, why haven't I sold something? It's been like 2 weeks,
Yeah.
did my first sale, I think in 3 weeks. And then, I was on phone time. I remember KW and I was just like, and everybody else, oh, don't waste your time. I'm like, no, people are calling. Like,
Yep.
I've got to answer the phone.
Yep.
And I think a lot of that has to do with just the fact that, like you said, like, you're like, I just have to get better. And I love the fact that now we're in 2020 and, 10 years later, there's such a younger generation of agents. But I mean, when we did it, gosh, like average was like 55, 60 years old. And we're just like these kids that are like, cause we're very similar in age. We're like these kids that are like, okay, well, I need to make money.
Yep. Yeah.
And I don't care really. I need to make money. And then now, like, I need to run a business.
Yep.
And like you said, replace myself and, evolve that thinking, hopefully, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just an evolution of understanding and objectives and goals, right? My goals went from creating stability for me to now changing the world and improving others' lives. Like that is my core focus now.
So now that you're here, 2020, about to be 2021, that we're recording this, what's the vision now? Like how do you show up now as a leader? Because before it was like just trying to get it done, like you said, survival mode. Like who does Josh need to be to show up as the CEO, and like your mindset, like your routine? Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is, in today's day and age, you have to be empathetic. You have to understand people are going through things. We're all going through things. Quarantine hasn't been fun on anybody. So one, you have to be empathetic. Two, we have to be decisive. In an environment like what we're going through and what could get a little bit worse is, there can't be room for ambiguity. Everyone needs to know their mission and their purpose, and everyone needs to be thinking in terms of what is my short and midterm objectives for survival. So I still think that's important. Now, as a company, we've been in stealth mode on a product called Trelly, and Trelly is a marketplace that we hope will change the way real estate investing is done in the long term. And that's my mission as a CEO. Is in 2021 we're going to be releasing starting in January.
Awesome.
And so that's going to become our flagship brand, and our other brands are effectively going to support our Trelly mission. So that's what I'm doing as a CEO. But what I would tell other CEOs, and I think they're all in the same spot, is focus on the short and midterm, be decisive, give clear direction to your people, and understand when goals are being set a little too high, given the circumstances. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think COVID and just this year has changed the trajectory of like how everybody does things, and being able to adapt and, be empathetic, because we are just dealing with a different kind of companies and people, and like just with our conversations of like blowing my mind about how companies are not even able to sustain growth, or forget growth and scaling. They weren't even able to just be open. And it was tough, but I think it also just speaks volumes to companies that are thriving in a situation like this and having the ability to adapt despite, COVID and quarantine and things like that.
Yeah. I think any company, we have a saying around my office, and it's adapt or die. And we think that we are always adapting. That's kind of why we have different products and brands, is because we're constantly seeing problems that we need to solve, bigger and more interesting problems. And so you have to be able to adapt, and you have to be able to roll with the punches, and they're going to continuously happen. And as long as you're realistic about what objectives you have to achieve, and you're paying attention to what's going on, and you're listening to your people, you're accepting feedback, you're paying attention to your competitors, it's like anything else. You can run the business off of KPIs. Same thing.
Can you talk about that a little bit, as far as what you look for? Like, because we would have so many conversations about, the expenses versus income. So can you talk about a little bit about how you run your business with your KPIs, like, hey, this is what my margins need to be. And obviously you don't have to talk about personal, but just like what you're looking for. Cause I think that's great advice for someone who has no idea. They're just like, I need to make money. Cause most entrepreneurs that are listening are either in the real estate industry or just starting a business. And they're like, I just need to make money. And you're like, no, it's much more than that, because how can you scale or even grow, period, if you don't know your numbers and know what you're looking for?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think everyone, if anybody is running a business, they just need to start with finding metrics that you can refer back to on a consistent basis that will tell you directionally where you're going. It doesn't have to get down to where you can triage exactly what is wrong. You just need to know directionally where you're going. So, our business there's probably 35 KPIs that I pay attention to. Everything from our margin percentages, our employee expenses, revenue per head, employee expense as a percentage of revenue, marketing expenses as a percentage of revenue. But then I also look at things like conversion rates on leads or phone time, answer rates, interaction lengths. So interactions with customers, how long that's lasting. All of these different KPIs I use in decision making. And so if I log in, if I don't look at anything for 2 months and I log in to my KPI dashboard and see what's going on with the business, in most instances, I can actually triage it just by looking at those metrics, because those are metrics that I kind of designed.
Yeah.
So you don't start with like, there's a book called, what is it? Straight Talk, Simple Numbers, Big Profits by Greg Crabtree. And the book actually talks a lot about financial metrics and whatnot. And I think that's a great starting point. But you identify what is the single most important, and you go from there. So for example, I have in each one of our products, we have one KPI that overall trumps all the other ones. And that one KPI
Priority
tells me which direction we are effectively going.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Because there's always one major goal, and then you have like the mini ones where it's like that way, you can measure to see like where you're at, but you have to have the smaller ones so that they're more tangible.
Yeah. And you want yourself, your leadership, you want everybody to be able to look at those KPIs and come up with the same opinions or perspectives as what needs to happen in order to improve them. So
Absolutely.
KPIs are critical, and you have to drive off of some kind of a constant.
I don't think people talk about that enough, because, there's no, we were talking about this yesterday, or I guess, last week.
It's all blurring together.
We were talking about this last week, and about how, there's no financial literacy, right? Like everything you've learned has been self-taught. It's like trial and error. And that's why it's so powerful when you're masterminding and you're networking with like-minded people, or, hopefully people that are smarter than you.
Yep.
And you are the king of relationships. Like you have so many people, like you said earlier, that you've been able to talk to. And this is stuff that is very normal. And I think it can be so easily defeating, where you're just like failing and mistakes and realizing like, no, those are just like, that's like your tuition, right? Like your mistakes are like your tuition. It's like, oh, this was
It's exactly what it is.
That's how much I paid for.
What did I learn out of it? Yep. What did I learn?
And it's a lot less defeating when you have that perspective.
Yep.
And like, I just, we're releasing our manual that's coming out, the How to Master Short Sale manual. And I'm very excited about that. But it's like, if that's how I viewed a lot of those things. And so when I changed my perspective on, okay, well, yeah, it sucks. I spent $5,000 on this or $3,000 on this or whatever, but I learned, and then we're able to pivot, like you said. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. It's all about what you learn. Fail fast, fail often.
And then hopefully you have people like you in your life that you can pivot a little bit faster. So,
well, yeah, definitely. You always have to. So for sure.
So thanks again for coming on, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the people that are watching, how can they connect with you?
Yeah. My email is josh@deshong.co, DESHONG.co.
And what was the app so that they can look out for it?
Yeah, check out Trelly, Trelly. It's on the App Store now, but it's in a beta. But expect it in January. So
if you're a wholesaler, investor, or you're in the real estate industry, this app is definitely going to change the way people wholesale, invest. So definitely check that out. Thanks again for coming on the show, and we will see you guys next time.
awesome.